Hero balance in Gigantic goes beyond things like hero health and ability cooldowns. When you have to factor in details like debuffs and stamina, the gameplay designers really have to think outside the box and in multiple perspectives and scenarios. With such a huge change in the stamina system, it's safe to imagine that there will be a shift. Hello everyone, this is Wolfie of Mistforge, and today I'd like to talk about two heroes who seem to have much more presence since the Arc patch went public. If it wasn't obvious by the video title, I'm talking about Knossos and Imani. I'll be going over the stamina changes in another video, but the important underlying fact for this topic in general is that skills no longer cost stamina to use. So the first thing I want to say is that Knossos and Imani have both never been bad heroes, but at the same time they've only really been niche picks that were to fit into a very specific team composition or circumstance. And what I mean by that is you would never see these heroes picked as a standard for their role on every map. Knossos is used best in a Deathball comp, running into battle as a support role with the Mighty Yop upgrade and chaining his limited crowd control with a Margrave or Wu and following up with great damage, but on maps with wide openings and distances, he starts to struggle. Imani works best on the Sanctum Falls map in keeping a careful eye over the river part of the map, and even during the clash she has several vantage points and seldom often needs assistance to perform well, but on maps that are very clumped with sharp corners and few shelves to snipe from, she can quickly become a hindrance. Before the Arc patch, you would rarely see either of these heroes played on the competitive level. It was a rarity because of the relative ease to deal with both of these heroes. Imani fell prey to multiple assassins and other mobile heroes who could easily toe-to-toe with her. The poor bull is a powerhouse, but displacements and other crowd control made him next to worthless. He could spend his whole combo and half of his stamina bar to close the distance only to get knocked away, and leave him unable to get to his target, nor unable to get away once the entire enemy turned on him. And this wasn't necessarily a bad thing at all. Despite being outclassed 75% of the time, both heroes still had their place and usefulness if they had the team to back them up. Some of the strongest teams in the Guardians arena like Apex and Nimbus implemented Knossos in some of their compositions, and it really took the scene by surprise. Every hero in this game fills a certain role to an extent, and when you're able to perform that role well, there's little that can really stop you. However, it's my honest opinion that the stamina changes seem to have really turned things on edge with these two heroes. But why is that the case? Surely every hero got a serious indirect buff because skills no longer cost any stamina, right? So why are Knossos and Imani the ones picked out of the roster over everyone else? Well, the Knossos one was already sort of explained. Knossos deals a lot of damage, but only if he can get close to people. He has the tools to get close with his base Q and E abilities, and some upgrades like TORUS and Going Up aided in keeping people in place. The issue lied in the fact that simply initiating the fight used over a third of your stamina bar, and that's being generous. Imagine, Knossos has to sprint into the fight, using Gore or Bull Rush to start off and quickly following up with the other ability. That's two abilities with long cooldowns now expended. Even if the enemy team hasn't knocked you away by now, you've started swinging your spears and using the occasional chuck to inflict damage at a short range. You may even have triggered a couple bleeds from the left mouse button Pierce upgrade and think you're doing well, only to discover that you've dried up your stamina bar. You realize now that the entire enemy team has turned their attention to you, and being such a large and menacing target, you've likely already lost half of your health by this point. This is where the Knossos can only go forward meme comes from, because at this rate the player knows that there's no turning back. Gore and Bull Rush are still on cooldown, your stamina is gone, and you're a large easy to hit target. Most would decide to fight it out and keep dealing as much damage as possible, but against a coordinated team you probably would not get much further if they started throwing disruptions at you. The stamina changes make Knossos far more reliable and also doesn't render him as free power if he can't finish a kill. His stamina expenditure has been reduced dramatically now that the only thing you really spend it on is moving. I'm sure many of you are thinking, how is that a bad thing? Well, first of all, Knossos still hits like a steroid injected truck. Even without his multiple damage buffs, Knossos has one of the highest base damage left mouse button combos and one of the fastest critical strike gains. Second of all, Knossos players can now use builds that were often unused simply because they were stamina inefficient. For example, immobilizing TORUS provides a lot of utility in terms of keeping enemies pinned down, which has always been Knossos' greatest weakness, and I see it being picked up very often. Before this patch, just using that ability cost around a quarter of your stamina and made the trade-off not worth it despite how simple it is to aim. Now that the cost is nothing, Knossos can stick to his targets long enough to shred them with left mouse button. Speaking of left mouse button, the Pierce upgrade has always been superior to Bruiser because of how simple it is to proc. It still has a stamina cost, but now you have more to use, more chances to apply a strong damaging bleed. The short story is that Knossos can deal far more damage for less risk. Imani is far easier to explain. Higher level Imani players have always argued about which upgrade tree is better on right mouse button in terms of damage output. And though Dialed In, Vital Organs, and the ever popular Combat Sniper are all valuable in their own rights, every Imani player understands that landing silent scope shots will earn you kills. Regardless of which upgrades you took, the real skill level for Imani was being able to balance your stamina usage. Silent Scope is coded to act like an ability. As such, before the arc patch, firing scope butts took a chunk of your stamina bar. Even the best Imani players had to really think about where their stamina was and not just where they were aiming. This was to make sure that if they started taking fire or were flanked by an assassin, they had the ability to get away and take shelter near a creature. It was a balancing act of map awareness and timing so that you didn't leave yourself a sitting duck. But now that you can fire scope shots without spending any stamina, it doesn't matter if you get jumped. Imani can fire freely and still have all 4 stamina bars by the time the enemy trip reached her. Now to be fair, Imani's strength will always be taking advantage of sightlines, and Sanctum Falls will probably always be her best map, and it's not a problem to give incentive to bring her to other maps. However, I'm not sure if this was the most healthy way of doing that. The point of this video is that these two heroes excel at what they do, but with the stamina changes it seems as though their weaknesses have been indirectly covered for them. And though both of these heroes have never really been bad, their flaws were exploitable. It felt like for the most part everyone else had a kind of balance change to compensate the stamina change and left Knossos and Imani to wreck solo queue. If it were up to me, I would see the damage output of these two reduce somewhat and see where it goes from there. But that'll be the end of this surprisingly long video. How do you think these two heroes perform because of the stamina changes? And who else would you say might be a little too strong right now in terms of overall balance? If you enjoyed watching, please share the video and subscribe to know when more come out. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you on the airship.